Hi, my loves. I have a lesson for us today. And for this lesson, you're going to need a couple of things just so you're prepared. So you're going to need some paper, and it can just be plain white paper or notebook paper, a pencil, and then crayons or markers, something that you can color with. So make sure you have those things. If you need to pause this video to go get those, you may. And then we're going to start with our book. So our whole lesson today is going to be on frogs. And I have something fun for us to do at the end about frogs. So we're going to read this nonfiction text or informational text about frogs. And I know that it's a nonfiction text because of many things. The first thing is really obvious. Right here on the cover, there is a picture of a frog, and it's a photograph. And usually if there's photographs, we know that it is a nonfiction text. So before I read, I'm actually going to point out a couple other text features of nonfiction books. So on my cover, I have that photograph, and we know that photographs are really important for nonfiction texts, and it's also what makes them pretty interesting. And I'm going to keep on turning. And not all books have this, but it has a table of contents. And we know both fiction books from our chapter books and nonfiction books have table of contents. In a nonfiction book, the table of contents helps us figure out what we're going to read and where we're going to read it. So if I wanted to read about frog babies, I know from looking in the table of contents that I would want to go ahead and turn to page 24. Another text feature that I have, well, there's actually a couple on this one. So there are photographs, and then there are also captions that tell us about the picture, and then this is a little blurb that tells us a little bit more about that illustration. And then towards the end of the book, I have a diagram with some labels. And at the end of nonfiction books, we have a glossary. Now, this isn't the biggest of glossaries, but it still is super helpful. And the glossary tells us the vocabulary word or the fancy word, the meaning of it, and in this book, they give us an illustration. So at the back of some nonfiction books, there is an index. This book, this author chose not to have an index, and that's okay too. So while we read the book Frogs, I really need you to put your nonfiction reader brain on. We have to look at all the illustrations and really dive deep into the details of this book. Now, because it's a nonfiction book, we're going to focus mostly on the main idea and some of the details about the book, which we do a lot with nonfiction books. If it was a fiction book, there would be a character. Is there a character in this book? No. And setting and a problem and a solution. We don't have those because this is our nonfiction book. So we're going to have our main idea, which is what our book is mostly about, and then the details that help support that main idea. Now, before I read, I have a feeling just by looking at this cover, you will know what the main idea is. Yep. Our main idea is frogs, and it's all about frogs. So I cannot wait for you to see the details in this book. Frogs by Elizabeth Carney. Frogs. Another really cool photograph. Another one in our table of contents. Splash, splish, splash. What's that sound? What is hopping and jumping around? What loves to swim? What loves to eat bugs? It's a frog. Can you hop like a frog? Frogs live all over the world, except Antarctica. Frogs usually live in wet places. They like rivers, lakes, and ponds. But some frogs live in trees. Some even live in the desert. Frogs can be found all over the world. Wherever they live, that's their habitat. Here's some photographs of a marsh frog, a marsupial frog, a red-eyed tree frog, and a bullfrog. And then it gives us the definition of habitat: the natural place where a plant or animal lives. A new heading, one of those text features of our nonfiction books. Croak. Look at this frog croaking. Some frogs' throats puff up when they make sounds. Each type of frog makes its own sound. The coqui frog is named after the sound it makes. It sounds like coqui. This frog is the size of a quarter. Can you imagine just the size of a quarter? Even small frogs can make loud noises. Croak, the deep hoarse noise that a frog makes. Frogs make different sounds for different reasons. Sometimes it's to warn other frogs of danger. Sometimes it's to call frogs nearby. This frog lives around noisy waterfalls. Other frogs would not be able to hear its calls, so it dances instead. It sticks out one leg and then the other. Can you dance like this frog? I don't know if Miss Lodato can dance like that frog. He is sticking his leg out really far. It's called a dancing frog. Frog food. That heading is telling us what we're going to read about. What is a frog's favorite food? Usually it's insects. Frogs eat dragonflies and crickets and other bugs. Some frogs eat bigger animals like worms or mice. The American bullfrog even eats other frogs. What is that pink flash? It's how a frog catches bugs. It shoots out his long, sticky tongue at a passing bug. The frog pulls the bug into its mouth. If your tongue were as long as a frog's, it would probably reach your belly button. Oh my goodness, that would be a long tongue. I think we might look a little silly. Every size and color. Frogs can be many different sizes. The smallest frog is as big as a fingernail. It's called a microfrog. I think just as big as your fingernail. It's so tiny. The largest is as big as a rabbit. That's a Goliath frog, and it looks like it's about 8 pounds. My goodness, that's just about as big as like a cat. Frogs can be different colors too. Some are green or brown, tiger striped leaf frog. Others have stripes or spots, Amazonian poison dart frog. Frogs can be red, yellow, or orange, red poison dart frog. They can even be bright blue. Watch out! Another heading. These colorful frogs may look pretty, but watch out. These frogs have poison in their skin. Their bright color warns enemies not to eat them. It's a poison dart frog, another poison dart frog, and a yellow banded poison dart frog. Frog babies. These are red-eyed tree frog eggs. All frogs, even the Tribellus, have mothers. Mother frogs lay eggs. When the eggs are ready, out pops the tadpole. Tadpoles are baby frogs, but they don't look like frogs yet. Tadpoles have tails. They live only in water. Pacific tree frog tadpole. Tadpoles grow up to be frogs. 1. At first, they breathe underwater with gills. And this tells us what gills are. The body parts on the side of the fish or tadpole through which it breathes. 2. They grow lungs for breathing air. 3. They grow legs for hopping and swimming. 4. In 3 months, they lose their tails. It's time to hop out of the water. Toads are frogs too. What's the difference between toads and frogs? Frog. Some frogs are poisonous, moist and smooth. Teeth and upper jaw. Long, powerful jumping legs. Most frogs have webbed hind feet, and eggs are laid in clusters or groups. Toads are a type of frog. Frogs spend most of their lives around water. Toads spend more time on dry land. Their bodies were built for where they live. They have no teeth, they're dry and bumpy, and they lay their eggs in long chains, and they have shorter legs for walking. Super frogs! A fake face fools enemies when frogs turn around. And then this is our glossary. So it says the words and the definitions, and it has a picture of it. The end. Now that we have read our nonfiction text, we're going to talk about the main idea and some of the details of the book. And to help organize our thoughts, we're going to put them into categories. So what we're going to do together is we're going to make a tree map. And that will help us categorize all the details that we have about frogs. Now, I have my big tree map up here, but if you have a regular piece of paper, and this is what Miss Lodato does to help her so I can see the spaces that I need to write my tree map in. So this is a piece of construction paper. It can be anything. You're just going to fold it once. And then you're going to fold it again. Just because our tree map has 4 categories. And then when you open it up, you're going to have 4 spaces for your categories. And then I have my finished one over here, where I did my tree map, but I have nice columns to help me with my categories. So we're going to think back to when we read the book Frogs, and we're going to think about what frogs can do, what frogs have, what frogs like, and what frogs are. So they will help us fill in our sentence. It's almost like a little sentence. So we can say frogs can, and when I think about our book, I can think about frogs can, and I know jump, and I remember, and I'm going to refresh your brains. I have the very first page is that frog jumping. So that's my frogs can jump. So I'm going to make sure I write jump in the can category. So jump. And now we just actually made a sentence. Not very juicy, but it's still a good sentence. Frogs can jump. I could even add to it. I can say frogs can jump high. Then I'm going to look at my next category, and it's frogs have. And if you remember, Miss Lodato is going to turn to that page with all of those frogs. And there's so many different things that frogs have, but I was visualizing this when I made this tree map of all the spots on that frog. So I'm going to say frogs have spots. And then our next category is frogs like. So I immediately think of all the food those frogs like, and on that page, those frogs are eating some bugs. And then the last one is frogs are. And I know that same page where I found that frogs have spots, there are all these frogs, and I know frogs are green. Some of them are green, and that's what always comes to my brain. So I'm going to write green over here. Green. So this is my challenge for you. In a little bit, I'm going to ask you to pause the video, and I want you to come up with as many details for each of these categories. And then when we come back, I'm going to show you my finished tree map, and you can see you might have something Miss Lodato didn't have, or I might have something you didn't have. If you need to, you can always go back in this video and re-watch the book, because the more we read, the more dendrites we get in our brain. If you re-watch it, then you might remember some of the details in the book. So go ahead and pause this video and we'll be right back. I hope you worked on your tree map. Let's look at our tree maps and see what we have the same and what's different. Maybe I can add something to mine, and maybe you can add something to yours. So under the category of can, I have frogs can jump, frogs can swim, frogs can lay eggs, frogs can croak, and frogs can dance. Under have, I have frogs have spots. Some of them do. Frogs have long, sticky tongues. We read about those long tongues. Frogs have poison, some of them. And frogs have stripes. We also know that frogs like bugs. Frogs like wet places. Frogs like to eat worms, some of them do. Some frogs like mice, and some frogs even like other frogs. And last, we know frogs are green, frogs are small, frogs are big, frogs are yellow and red, so they can be all different types of colors. So now that we have our thinking map done, there's so many extra things we could do with this. This could help us write our own nonfiction book about frogs, or we could even use what we know about frogs to write a fiction story about a frog. We can write about how one day when we were turned into a frog, if we want to use our imagination. So this tree map really helps organize our thoughts. We know the main idea and then look at all of those details that help support the main idea. What you're going to need next is a piece of paper and a pencil, and then something to color with. Color pencils, crayons, or markers for our next activity. So go ahead and make sure you have those. All right, to finish up all the fun learning that we've done on frogs, I thought we could do a directed drawing together. Now remember, our directed drawings are never going to look exactly the same, and that's okay because they're our own. And Miss Lodato is not the best drawer, but I always take my time and just try to follow the directions, and I try my best. And so that's all you need to do. And this is going to be more of a fictional frog, and you'll see why. So get your white piece of paper, hold it the portrait way, which we know is the long way. And in the middle of the paper, we're going to make an oval this way. So Miss Lodato is going to go ahead and make an oval like so. So if you look, it's not like all the way up at the top and it's not all the way at the bottom. We're going to need some space for that too. So make sure you have space for that. And then we're going to do two little humps on top of my oval. So we're going to go whoop. So those two little humps, and then inside these are going to be the frog's eyes. We're going to go ahead and put in his eyeballs. All right, now after you do that, we're going to try to make his body. So I'm going to come about here. I'm going to curve on over. I'm going to do the same exact thing on the other side. Curve on over. All right, now that we have that, we are going to give him a mouth. And I want to say this frog is croaking, so I'm going to make sure. I'm going to do a line up there, and then I'm going to do almost like a U up there. So there's his mouth. And then in his mouth, we're going to have his tongue, but we're going to have it inside his mouth because I don't know if I can draw that long of a tongue. So here's his tongue. I could even do this. I just did two little mountains in there. Then I'm going to draw his legs on each side of him. So I'm going to come out about here, and it's going to be like another hump. Those are his legs behind him. And then another one over here. Just like that. And then I'm just going to do his little feet, which are like little ovals. I'm going to put some lines in. make his webbed toes. And then I'm going to go back up here and I'm going to add more because his eyes can't really just be sticking on top of his head. There needs to be part of his head. So I'm going to go and almost go right around him. And then, like I said, he's a fictional character. We're going to give him a little bit of a bow tie. Or if you want, if you want to do a bow up here, if you want to make him or her look realistic, you can absolutely save the bow tie, but sometimes it's just a little fun. So I'm going to give a bow tie right here. And then we're done. And if you want, you can always add the setting. We know that frogs like wet places, so you might draw a pond behind them. Or you might, it's going to be a sunny day out, so you might want to add a sun. Or you might want to add a little bug over here. You might be trying to get him. So you can use your imagination to add things. So after I'm done with this, I'm going to show you what my first one looked when I was finished coloring. I hope you had fun. Enjoy, and this picture would be a fabulous thing to add if you did your story about a frog or your nonfiction book about a frog. There's so many great things you can do. All right, bye loves.